The DCEU has got to be one of the most inconsistent and split franchises in recent years, and I truly believe that it's time for a major change. Now before I go on, I ask if you guys could please like and subscribe to the channel. It only takes 2 seconds, but it would mean the world to us. Now, I've been a huge DC guy for as long as I can remember. I was just so intrigued at these superhumans with abilities that one could only dream of. So all the talents they had is not a means to personal gain, but a gift to help share with others. This act of being able to go through the struggles of an average person takes so much bravery to do. Maybe recognize the heroes within my own support system, my own community, and even recognize the hero within myself. I would be lying if I said the values that are portrayed in these pages don't resonate with me often. How these imaginary characters have contributed to my own personal character over the years. So yeah, safe to say I only want what's best for this company. But that means being honest about the trajectory of things. And look, I haven't been the first person to trash this franchise's decisions. Heck, I won't even be the first person to bring up half of these ideas before. But with the way things are going, I just thought it would be fun to add my 2 cents to things. So, first order of business, how do we get to this point of needing change in the first place? Now, the main thing about the DCEU is that they have been in the hot seat for so long that the problems are all over the place. Maybe it's from the directors. Maybe it's from the actors. Maybe it's the movie's pacing. Maybe it's the movie's writing. Maybe it's something that could have been controlled. And maybe it's just a circumstance of the audience they're trying to cater to. The main issue is that there are too many issues, leading to a whole list of people involved just frantically waiting to point their fingers at the next. But honestly, it's been everyone's fault. Doesn't mean that some things didn't impact a bit more than others, but everyone has had a hand at something. Even us as critics and as viewers. All these small inconveniences just build up to form this giant roadblock. You know, such as the major roadblock in DC's lifetime competitor, Marvel. The MCU has quite possibly been the most dominating franchise in film for the past decade or so. They're creeping up to almost $27 billion made in revenue, with them having 1 to 2 movies top 10 in worldwide box office every year except 3, 2020, 2011, and 2009, since the first official MCU film in Iron Man 2008. What's even funnier is that of the years that they didn't make top 10, 2 of those years they didn't even release, and their highest for the third still made it top 15 for that year. Aside from that, they have asserted themselves as a part of modern day pop culture, releasing successful series on Disney Plus frequently, and in general forming themselves a dedicated fan base that is seemingly growing by the minute. Having that as your main competition cannot be the most assuring thing for any franchise, especially with them having a 5-year head start and releasing more often. DC and Marvel have had a chokehold over the comic industry for years now, so it's only natural for those comparisons to be made over their next major leaps as companies in building these modern cinematic universes using their historic characters. While the MCU benefited from these comparisons, being noted as the company to do it successfully, the DCEU was constantly reminded what they were not, how behind they were on things, and how they just didn't stack up to the big dogs at Marvel. People poked judgment at the more serious tone that the DCU was trying to brand themselves around, and how they felt better connected to the jokey characters over at the other company. The criticism was clearly getting to the execs' heads, and they caved under the thought of lost profit, leading to underdeveloped and illogical projects to hop on certain waves that were formed by the competitor. Take, for example, them trying to capitalize off the whole superhero team-up trend initiated by Avengers Age of Ultron and Captain America Civil War by trying to make their second film in the franchise a team-up movie as well, despite the fact that we are meeting most of the members of this team for the first time in this exact film. They even decided to do this again when they dropped Justice League just a year later with even more characters. They were strictly of the mindset that they capitalize as quickly as they can, despite the fact that we as viewers have never met these characters before and therefore have no emotional connection to them whatsoever. So now we're left with a jam-packed movie that consists of not only a central plot of why they need to team up, but us learning why these individual characters are supposed to matter to us in the first place, especially if we're supposed to care about them enough to see all their solo movies later on. Comparison is truly the thief of joy, and in an effort to stretch themselves out to be like the DCEU and the MCU at the same time, they fell flat on their faces. Now, this is an issue that both the fandom and the executives had a hand in creating. However, what fans can't really control is if a movie is actually good or not. And well, the DCEU can best be described as shoddy. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that some companies are so inconsistent that they can produce gems such as Wonder Woman and the Suicide Squad, but also produce atrocities such as Suicide Squad 2016 and Wonder Woman 1984. They're even inconsistent in whether they make bad original films or bad sequels. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is simply something that no amount of pre-planning can actually fix. If your movie is bad, then your movie is bad, and you can't really work around that. And sadly, this stigma has simply been attached to the DCEU brand as a whole, to the point that unless a major change is made, we will simply see it as the company that gave us Joker with grills and terrible CGI for Henry Cavill's mustache. It's like, other than the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, I've never seen so many video documentaries posted where a movie was just absolutely trashed and destroyed from minutes to hours, as much as I saw for Batman v Superman. People were acting like Zack Snyder himself physically assaulted everyone who saw it. That is not the type of criticism you should be receiving on your second movie in the franchise. The pure rage that everyone were spewing, it's as if the world had finally reached a universal understanding that they should absolutely hate this movie. The DCEU was essentially tainted before they even got the chance to shine, and that is a reputation that is very hard to come back from. The thing about the DCEU that I mentioned a bit earlier is that they have a whole other subsection of negative reputation, which they've received from out-of-film antics as well. Most in regards to the actors they have on their brand and the complicated relationship between Warner Bros., the actor in question, and the viewer themselves. And it seems that quite often we hear about a disturbance of some sort in this complex relationship. You see how much backlash the company was taking from Ray Fisher speaking on his negative experience as the role of Cyborg, claiming abusive and unprofessional treatment from director Joss Whedon, that has been backed and supported by Wonder Woman actress Gal Gadot and Aquaman actor Jason Momoa. Public approval dropped and continues to do so as Fisher makes it known the scandalous actions taken from the execs in order to sweep this situation under the rug. You switch things up some, and now you have a different controversy in the mass amount of negative press for firing Henry Cavill as Superman. A decision that shocked many, as Cavill was pretty well received by many fans and was willing to reprise the role in any future DCEU films. Then you switch it up even more, and now you have all these situations of the terrors Ezra Miller has been causing. Out of respect for everyone involved in these actions, I will not clarify what they have done. Just know that this is a terrible human being who has been rightfully fired. And even though the DCEU has no involvement in their out-of-work actions, they will clearly be reflected upon in not the greatest light afterwards. All of these interactions are just giving the impression that Warner Bros. DCEU provides an unsafe and unhealthy work environment where talent can be harassed, abused, and prematurely let go with no studio backing in the slightest. As you can see, the DCEU is in some deep problems right now, despite the facade of confidence they seem to want to portray for the general audience. But they are also faced with a pretty unique circumstance coming up soon, but they can change the landscape of everything, only if they so choose to take this route. Next year is set to be the release of the first ever Flash solo movie, and ironically enough, Ezra Miller's last time reprising the role. But it's clear that this upcoming film storyline will be centered around Flashpoint. For the four of you guys who don't know what this comic storyline is, it's essentially a storyline that follows Barry going back in time and saving his mother from being killed. However, this has major ramifications as this one change alters the entire landscape of everything. Everything from Bruce dying in the alley and his father becoming Batman, to Superman never landing in the town of Smallville, but right into the hands of the government. Now, skipping to the end of the story, Barry ends up undoing his mistakes, but the cracks have already been made and nothing is truly ever the same ever again. Now, the DCEU has a rare opportunity to canonically reset the DCEU as a whole, allowing them to properly have a good go at things and potentially building a successful comic universe in the process. I mean, if they're willing to work out the kinks of acquiring competent writers and directors, while also not having executives heavily messing with the creative aspects of the filmmaking process, in addition to not trying to speed up things in an effort to try to stay up to date with the competitors. And while many people would be frustrated at the reset, this gives way to an opportunity to flip the initial judgment of the studio into a positive. But can I be honest for a second? If I was in charge of how to operate after Flashpoint, I think I would just get rid of the DCEU entirely. DC movies are at its best when they're able to be independent of each other and can truly embrace the vision of the director they have in charge. Because these characters are so well built, a creative mind can just run wild with them. The Joker and the Batman, two excellent examples of fantastic stories being told that they were disconnected from everything else and contain this brooding style that was heavily criticized by many only a couple of years ago, now stand on top as some of the best comic adaptation in years. This disconnected approach will also allow for an easier time to transition from style to style, depending on the characters that is actually being adapted. And we know that this company has range, considering that they have released projects such as the Suicide Squad all the way down to the Batman. So while Batman can have the dark-centered tones, you can, on the contrary, have a Superman film based on hope and inspiration. This also provides something that the MCU doesn't really have, and that's self-contained stories that offer much variety, thus ultimately separating the studio a bit more from their competitors, while also having slight prevention of a possible poor performance of one film carrying over to the other. Just a bit of extra insurance in case they have their inconsistent moments. DC's cinematic universe is something I want to see successful really badly, but that I can't really read into what will happen next. They have shown their flashes of greatness, but between the controversies, the lack of consistency, and living in the MCU's shadow, it'll be hard to show its full capabilities for now.